What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Jack of All Trades YouTube video where we're going to be talking some Division 2 again. I know I haven't posted in a little bit. There's been a lot going on with Title Update 22 in the Division, and I've also had a lot going on in my personal life, but now we're diving in. There's lots of new gear. Honestly, I didn't know what to start with, but I just unlocked the new exotic holster that everyone has been very hyped about, and I want to talk about it today because I feel like a lot of people aren't really understanding how to use it properly. So let's get in the game and start looking at all the different things going on with this holster, how to use it optimally, and some build ideas or combinations that you might find useful. Let's get in there. Alright, everybody, so this is not a build video. We're not going to go into build options that much here. I just really want to talk about the holster specifically. So if you're unfamiliar, this is a damage-based holster, comes with weapon handling, crit chance, and the buffs are procced via swapping. So it's a little complicated, a lot of people get confused. The first weapon you swap to, you get rate of fire and weapon damage. So that's going to be, assuming you're starting with your primary weapon, when you swap to your secondary, you actually get this number 1 buff. And then when you swap back to your primary, you get the number 2 buff, which is mag size and reload speed. And these buffs remain active for 12 seconds or until the next weapon swap. Okay? So, right away, these two buffs are both damage-oriented, but very different. The first one is really focusing on burst DPS. It's increasing our raw weapon damage, and, of course, rate of fire, which is a direct multiplier of DPS, but of the burst type. Because the higher our rate of fire, the less time that we're going to spend shooting our mag, and that's not helping with our reload speed. So our sustained DPS is not going to be as strong. We're going to be spending more proportionate time reloading because we're shooting our mag faster. So this is a burst bonus, basically. Whereas in the number 2, you'll see it's the opposite, kind of yin-yang theme going on. It's giving us mag size and reload speed. This isn't directly increasing our DPS, our burst DPS at all, but our sustain is going to be much better because our mag size is 50% larger, so we're shooting for longer before we have to hit a reload. And then when we do eventually hit that reload, we're getting 50% reload speed so that we can get back up and start shooting again faster. So there's this burst sustain thing going on, and that's honestly been quite a theme with the last patch. The updates that they've rebalanced all the weapons to seem to now have a much more linear relationship between burst and sustain. The top burst weapons are going to be the worst sustain DPS weapons, and you'll see this across pretty much all the categories. Like the highest burst SMG is going to be the worst sustained DPS SMG, vice versa. Same for like ARs, LMGs. That's the general rule of thumb of how they've been balancing things across the board. So this is really interesting now because this is playing into that, it's doubling down on this burst damage versus sustained damage. And that's what I really want you guys to think about when you're choosing what weapons you want to take advantage of for these different bonuses. Okay? Now, before we start getting into the specific weapons and the swapping, I will start by saying that there's actually kind of 2 general categories here of how I could see you using this holster. Okay? What's very important to note is there's actually some sort of hidden mechanics going on here that aren't listed in this description that you need to know so you can understand how to use it best to your build and your playstyle. At least as of right now. We'll see if these things get changed or patched, but I'll assume that it's working as intended, even though it's not listed here. Okay. One of them is that there's no cooldown listed, and that's indeed the case. If you look at something like the very obvious pairing of versatile, and I have the perfect versatile here. There'll definitely be a build video coming out on my channel with that. You'll see that has this caveat. at most once per 5 seconds per weapon type. Okay, so if we go to the range here, I was talking about the perfect versatile that has at most once per 5 seconds per weapon type. So this is also a talent that involves swapping weapons, and you get a bonus upon swap. That's what procs the talent. But it says at most once per 5 seconds per weapon type. So you'll see here that when I swap, actually I'm going to take out the holster just to keep it simple. Okay, so it's just, don't worry about anything else in the build, just focus on the buffs that you're going to see coming up for perfect versatile. Okay, so I swapped my LMG, and you'll see that down there I have my LMG versatile buff. Okay, and then it finishes, I swap back to my SMG, but you'll see it has that cooldown there. Same thing will happen when I swap back to my SMG. Even if I don't let it finish and I swap back to my LMG, you'll see I get the LMG buff there at the bottom, but I also have that shorter gray 5-second cooldown of the SMG buff. And what that's doing is that no matter what swap you do, whether you wait for the thing to naturally finish, like you saw with the LMG there, or if I swap and then quickly swap away, it won't let me swap back to the SMG, right? So if I swap away that, and it's on cooldown now, the LMG, and I try to swap back, boom, it's not going to re-proc versatile because it has that 5-second cooldown, that caveat of at most once per 5 seconds. And what that's doing is that you can't instant swap back to re-proc the buff. You have to be off of the buff for 5 seconds, but for that weapon type before you can get back on it. Now, that doesn't affect your uptime if you do it properly, because you just swap to an SMG, use your SMG buff, right? And it lasts 10 seconds. Whereas the cooldown's only 5. So then you swap to your LMG, and then actually only halfway through, I can either continue to use the LMG for that remaining half, or I can swap back right away if I want to get back to the SMG. See, like that, and then you just wait for the cooldown to finish, and then swap back. So if we get rid of that, and now you'll see how it works with Centurion Scabbard. Okay, so you'll see like a little helmet show up there, right? And it's going down, but then when I swap, I get the other helmet. So there's one helmet that's filled in, the headpiece, and the other one that's not. And look at that. So you can swap back and forth instantly. In fact, you can do it very quickly. You have to let the other one proc. If you just go like this, you see how fast I'm doing it? It's not actually doing anything. But if you go off and then back on, boom, you get it back. So I've got that full helmet on this gun right now. Swap off. Ooh. Just fast enough. You have to wait till you see that other helmet and then back, boom. So it like acknowledges the swap, and then you can come back. So there isn't really a cooldown. As long as you're just getting that swap in and just registering, you can swap back and then get that bonus. So that is what I would say is the first categorical way of using the holster, is to abuse one of the bonuses because there's no cooldown. Now, I don't know if this is intended, right? It didn't say anything about the cooldown. They have other talents in the game, like I just showed, Versatile, that has the cooldown, so maybe it's intended that it works this way. But essentially, let's say you want that, 20% rate of fire and 20% rate of damage is pretty damn good, and to have that basically all the time, that's pretty powerful. So you could say, screw it, I don't want the mag size reload speed, I want to keep abusing this, and then as soon as that cooldown runs down, you hit a reload, you swap, and then you swap back, and then you re-get that buff. You don't have to wait that 5 seconds. Now, it does take time to go through that swap. Even though it's quite quick, it does take a little bit of time, but the fact that there's no cooldown that you're forced into, that is a way that you can use this holster. You could also use it for the mag size and reload speed as well. But I would say that's the first kind of way is just like not using it and committing to the swap on both ends and going with that flow, but just kind of abusing that no cooldown to use only one of the buffs on one of your guns. So you're not going to be going back and forth between your two guns. You really just have one primary, and you're trying to take advantage of one of these things for that weapon. The other way is to make your build and choose your weapons so that you're going naturally through that flow of 12 seconds with this one buff, then I switch to my other one, take advantage of the other buff with my other weapon, and choosing weapons that synergize well with what I was talking about here, the burst and sustain bonuses. And that's what we'll talk about now. Okay? So the first one here is a very strong burst damage bonus, and the other one is a strong sustain damage bonus. And what I would recommend is that you choose weapons that are of the opposite type for the bonus that you're trying to get. That, I think, will bring the best of both worlds out of the weapon. So look at the choices I have here so far, right? This is the highest burst damage SMG. It's a vector, high RPM, small mag, good damage, It's got a decently snappy reload, but this is definitely a burst choice and not a sustain choice. The highest sustain SMG is actually the T821. I think it might actually be the Tommy gun or the M1928, but it doesn't have mod slots. I like the T821, right? So this is like one of the top sustain SMGs. You see it shoots really, really slow, a big mag, still got a snappy reload, right? But this is a sustain choice because you're spending so much time, very, very high mag damage, and it shoots slow. And you'll see that kind of going on as well. Usually higher firing weapons like Vectors, FAMAS are burst oriented, whereas the slower firing ones are more sustain oriented. So we have the highest burst SMG here, and then the Bullet King is the king of sustain for sure, because, well, you never have to reload it. So its burst damage is its sustain because, well, it's an infinite mag. It's a bottomless mag, right? That never has to go through reload. So this is like the peak definition of sustain right there. And so what we want to do, what I would recommend, is using the burst damage bonus on your sustain weapon, the Bullet King, and then using your sustain bonus on the SMG, which is a burst weapon. What's going to happen here is, right, so our first swap from the Vector to the Bullet King is going to give us 20% rate of fire, 20% weapon damage. And we're going to take advantage of that for the entire bonus because we're never going to hit a reload because the Bullet King is sustained master, never has to reload, right? So we're going to take max advantage of that rate of fire and that weapon damage. Whereas if you were to use this on the Vector already shoots ridiculously fast. You're going to drain the mag in like half a second, and then you're going to be spending more time during that 12-second buff reloading your Vector than actually shooting it, right? Because you're stacking a burst with a burst. Now, that could be interesting if that's something you want to do, and you've got some interesting ways of playing around with it, but this is what I'm trying to explain so you understand the burst versus sustain dynamic going on here. The mag size and reload speed for our Vector is going to be much more advantageous, in my opinion, because the Vector is super high burst damage. The only thing holding it back is the fact that, well, it's got a tiny mag, and you have to reload it half the time. You're spending half the time using it, reloading it, and that's the buff that's going to help with that, right? If the Vector had an infinite mag, it would be ridiculously destructive, right? It doesn't need a better burst damage. It needs to be having higher uptime, and that sustain bonus of number 2 is what's going to help. So this is what that looks like. All right, so we're going to swap to the LMG, and you see, so that blank head is giving us that rate of fire and that weapon damage, and you'll listen to this. Now, if you heard that, right, when we lost the buff, we lost that rate of fire. You should be able to tell. And then when we swap to our Vector, Look at that. Attack vector with 58 in the mag. Snappy reloads. Now we're spending a lot more time shooting than normal. We lose the buff. Check that reload. See the difference? We got a lot less ammo in the mag and a longer reload, which means we're spending a lot more time shifted towards the reloading end of using this weapon when we don't have that sustained buff. And then we can just go back, so we can go back and forth. Fair fire, and then, you know, when you want, boom, swap to SMG. And there's a lot of very interesting combinations that you can do here. So this, I think, gives a good idea of the two ends of the spectrum that you're trying to balance here and synergize with the holster. But there is one other secret mechanic going on here that we need to go over, okay? Because this is going to really change how you choose the weapons for this holster. This buff, number 2, that gives mag size and reload speed, it reloads your weapon as well. And that is ridiculously powerful. Check this. So our primary weapon is the one that's going to get that second buff. The rate of fire, buff number 1. Okay. I'm going to swap to our shotgun, get buff number 2, big mag. Crazy thing. Now I'm not going to reload it. I'm going to leave one in the chamber. Okay. Swap. Now, if I swap back, watch what happens. It goes from 1, boom. It reloads it for you. Isn't that crazy? And that's super, super powerful. That's probably one of my favorite mechanics of this holster, even though it doesn't list it there, is that it reloads your weapon for you. And when you're trying to pick a weapon that, you know, is sustained versus burst, the reloading is a very important element of that. And when you're swapping back and forth, the biggest downside I've experienced in gameplay is that you'll swap to a weapon and then you forgot to reload it, or you mistimed it on the reload into the swap, and then you have no bullets and you're not ready to shoot. This makes sure that whenever you swap to your weapon that's getting that second buff, it's ready to rock. And with weapons that have very long reload times, nah, you getting it? Check this out. You can put a freaking shotgun, right? 4.7 second reload. You know, you can use this. Completely empty. You swap, you get your damage buff, you use this, blah, 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 blah. Swap back to your shotgun. Boom! It's full to the brim and to the new max with that 50% mag size bonus. And swap back, and it reloads it for you. And that, I think, is a crazy, crazy combination, crazy element that you're going to want to take into account when using this as well. The other thing, too, is you can swap to your pistol. Swapping to your pistol doesn't proc that the Centurion Scabbard buff. So if you have the wrong buff on the wrong gun, right? So this one has the rate of fire one. If I wanted to give it the other buff, you swap to your pistol and then swap back, and then boom, it has the other buff, right? Pistol, back, boom. I guess that is something you could do. If you just want to use the same weapon, you know what? Hey, we just discovered a new option for how to use it. You can swap back and forth with your secondary and your primary. You know, if you just want to abuse it for one gun, or if you want to use both buffs for one gun, swap to your pistol, boom, swap back. And the pistol swap is actually very, very fast. That could actually be very, very interesting as well. I kind of like that. Alright everybody, I think I've talked about everything I wanted to dive into with this very unique and very powerful exotic holster. You unlock it relatively early in the season track, so get your hands on it and think about all of the elements that I've discussed in this video for how you want to build this for your setups. There's a very strong synergy going on here with burst and sustain, with this holster, with weapon swapping, with the theme of TU22 and rebalances across the board. And like I showed you, there's some very unique mechanics going on with this holster that we can totally abuse, and you'll be seeing some proper build videos using this holster in the near future. I just wanted to get this general overview of the exotic gear piece to you guys quickly so that you can see what's going on and start getting creative yourself. Stay tuned for some build videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Enjoy.